What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Knife Show, where we dissect the human psyche and society. My name is Denzel Mensa. I'm an ENFJ.
And my name is Joyce, and I'm an INFJ. And today we will be talking about accepting life versus projecting onto life and manifesting the life that you want in your head. There are two ways to go about life. The first way is to accept things as they are, and the second way is to turn things into the way that you want them to be or have a way that you want it to be that is more ideal. And so, which one do you pick? Which one do you choose? Today, we will be talking about that.
Yeah, and I think this is a big thing, especially as NJs, because as NJ types, then a lot of times we tend to think about, okay, we use NI, so we're able to look into the future or the future that we are either foreseeing or that we're trying to create. So when we are using NI in this way, then a lot of times we could just be seeing the future, just like what's going to pan out. But also, if you're infusing enough SE into that NI alongside whatever extroverted judging function that you're using. So if you're an NTJ, then you're using TE. If you're an NFJ, then you're using FE. Then you are using that FE TE with your SE to be able to manifest to an extent what it is that you're creating. So this can become like very tricky, intricate, and like complex, which is why I wanted to have us discuss it, especially being an ENFJ who has NISE in the middle, and then Joyce being an INFJ who has NI at the top and then SE as like an inferior function. And then based off of things that, we've experienced with our coaching and even panel discussions and stuff like that, what maybe like other types experience in this way. But we're going to start from our personal lives, and then we're going to try like branch that out and see if there is a pattern that has to do with type or anything over there. So all that being said, Joyce, how much I want to actually, I'm genuinely curious as an INFJ on a scale of 1 to 100, not 1 to 10, which is kind of like the same percentage, but still like 1 to 100, about how much of life would you say that you just kind of like accept versus how much of it do you project? Like how much of whatever's in your head do you try to project onto life?
For me personally, it's probably a 10 out of 100 ratio that I accept, and the 90% I kind of reject. But that's more of a me thing. For this, I kind of see the frog metaphor and the pot metaphor. So they say that if you put a frog into hot water, it'll immediately jump out. But if you put a frog into lukewarm water and you slowly bring up the temperature, the frog will boil in the water until it is completely cooked. And that's a metaphor for life. Typically, it's easy to accept life if it's mediocre. And you believe that, oh, this is fine as it is. There's no major reason to complain. There's no major grievance. And so you just accept it as it is. So sometimes it's luckier in its own messed up way to be given an obvious reason to want to change life. Because on one hand, it's more extreme and it's more harsh, and you might have more trauma and you might have more stuff happen to you. But two, you're given the realization that, hey, you actually really have to change your life. You don't have a choice. And so when you're giving something, or you're given a hand in life that is clearly unacceptable, you're more likely to reject it and more likely to manifest the life that you want. And as an NJ, I'm just naturally idealistic too. And I think it's also the NF temperament as well. And so I always see how the world could be, how people could treat each other better, how we could love each other more, and all of that gushy, warm, fuzzy stuff. And I notice it regularly in the dynamics that I see around me. I notice that when my mother and father are fighting, ever since I was probably 4, that it was like, wow, this is unacceptable and you guys need to get along, because if you guys don't get along right now, imagine 50 years down the line, you guys are still going to hate each other, but even more, because right now it's already so bad. So later, it's just going to escalate. So I naturally understood escalation from a young age. And so I really wanted to prevent problems before they became unresolvable problems. And so that was something I was really passionate about. And it's a little bit discouraging because I can feel very invisible when I try to explain, hey, I think there's something wrong here. And it falls on deaf ears over and over again. It's almost like I'm talking to a wall. Whenever I try to instigate change, it's met with resistance typically. And so I've learned to keep that to myself. And so I typically try to manifest for my own life, or I even become a little bit complacent. And then I don't like the fact that I'm complacent. And so there's that as well, because not a lot of people listen to new ways of doing things or new ways of thinking about things. And it can feel lonely in that sense because you're stuck with this knowing that no one else knows about or accepts. And so it sounds like sometimes to other people, oh, they're just making up something in their mind. But really, I'm imagining and simulating how things are going to turn out if they keep going the way that they're going. And if the Titanic is still headed towards the iceberg, then I mean it's going to hit the iceberg unless you tilt the wheel a little bit. And I understood that. And I especially in the realm of relationships though, and I really wanted the perfect or ideal relationship or a soulmate, as cringy as that sounds. But Kiersey says, I just want that, so I don't feel as weird for wanting that. I've always saw ways in which, oh, that is not a soulmatey situation. And so I want to manifest that ideal because I had the ideal of, oh, I want this bond, this sacred bond with another person so badly. And so that's one of the things I've always wanted to manifest with every fiber of my being. And that is one of the things that are, yeah, most important to me. But yeah, Denzel, what are the things you want to manifest, and what are your thoughts on the question that you asked me?
No, that was actually very comprehensive response. I really like how you put all of that, because uh, I think that this is something that I'm even still trying to pattern out with people around me, because I do see, like, I feel like there are those types of people who, they're if anything, they're not really trying to necessarily manifest, but they're trying to position themselves. So it's almost like they're not going to really try to project onto the world or impose onto the world what they want to see, but rather they're able to have enough foresight to be able to see what they want, or where the world is going, and then position themselves in a way that they can receive things. So it's almost like, if you know where the apple from the tree is going to fall, then rather than climbing up the tree and like shaking it and stuff like that and trying to get that, then you might just walk right directly underneath, have the patience to wait, and then the apple falls right into your lap. And I feel like there are people that are like that are like, yeah, like they're just really good. In fact, I think that one example that comes to mind is Bran, I believe, from Game of Thrones. He was somebody who, uh, I I do actually believe that he had INFJ preferences, and cognition, and he seemed to have that kind of like mindset. Like he always knew like what was going to happen, and he just kind of like positioned himself in the right places rather than influencing something to change or to happen. At least for the most part. That's not to say that every INFJ is like that. But I just was wondering, like, how that might be, because, then you might think of like maybe an SE Dom who is somebody who would climb up that apple tree and is like, I want this. And they just shake it and they try to get all the apples that they possibly can. And they are like imposing so much onto life that they're not really just taking it as it goes. But then I can also see the SE users being the types to be like, yeah, no, just take it easy, man. Like, and they just drifting with wherever life takes them, perceiver style, and not really, like trying to get from life in that way or impose or project onto it, but rather just ride its wave, rather than manifesting from it and enjoying the ride. Whereas, like, a more judger like type of person, would be more of the type to like, no, we can't just like flow with life. We have to grip it by its neck, wring it until we get what we want. I don't know. So this is, I know that there's like a lot of extremes here. So this is actually what I'm trying to still pattern out for myself. And who knows, maybe it might not even have to do with type. I don't know. But it's just a theory that I'm starting with and I'm trying to see and branch out. All of that being said, for me, I see myself coincidentally kind of like in the middle. And I think this has a lot to do with my faith as well. So I don't really know 100% how it would have been if I didn't have the faith that I had. But with my faith, I always had the mindset that's like, do everything that you possibly can, like work as if it depends on you, and then pray as if it depends on God. So ever since I was younger, then it was almost like this thing that was like, okay, I want this girl, or I want that PlayStation, or I want this, or I want that. And I'm going to do everything that I can to get it. Like, I'm going to put in the work, I'm going to do all of that. But at the end of the day, God's the one who's going to cause it to happen. And if it doesn't happen, then that means that He knew what was best, and so therefore, it just wasn't for me. And if it does happen, that means that I gave Him like I provided all the right tools for Him to be able to, like, to work with. So it was almost like a comforting thought that no matter what happened in my life, uh, I could always just believe that, oh, God was behind it. And that was like very comforting because then, even in the worst of situations, even when I couldn't understand the purposes of today, like, dang, I put in so much effort for this and it just didn't work. Like, why didn't I get this job? Why didn't that girl like me back? Like, why did this friend leave me? Like, all of these thoughts, then I can just rest back in, it just wasn't meant to be. Like God has His own reasons for it. And then later on in life, I'd be like, oh, maybe this is why God didn't want me to be still close to that person. Maybe this is why God didn't want me to have that job. Like, oh, that happened over there. Like, wow, who knows, and so I'm also, like, of course, naturally theorizing like how that would have to do with having NISE in the middle, whereas like I always have a vision of what I do want and I try to project it onto the world, and I do definitely impose, especially as a judger dominant type. So it's like I am holding life by the neck, and I'm trying to, like, make sure that I'm getting out of it like everything that I put into it. But at the same time, I try to keep enough flexibility to where it's like, maybe I don't know what's best, and perhaps I should let certain things coast. So I don't, I wouldn't, yeah, I wouldn't say the like how you said, like 10 out of 100. That's really impressive. That's really cool. It's like, wow, like you really, like, everything that you have right now in your life, with the exception of maybe like 10% of it, like you have really shook the tree to get it. And I think that that's really dope in its own way. Whereas, like, for me, and again, it could be influenced by a lot of things: Christianity, um, uh, uh, me being a nine, SE tertiary, maybe none of those. I don't know. But I would feel like, as much of a God complex as I have, I would wonder, like, I wonder how much more I would enjoy if I didn't control so much and I just allowed myself to coast a little bit. And I feel like that's a lot of what I do in my dreams too. Because in my dreams, I'm able to, I don't know how and why, but I always somehow become conscious that I'm dreaming, and I begin to lucid dream unintentionally. So I will have nightmares, and right in the middle of my nightmare, then I come to and I'm like, "Oh, this is a nightmare." And I'm able to, like, okay, and I won't let the people around me know that I'm aware that this is a nightmare. I'll just kind of let the nightmare play out as a movie and know that at any point I could yank myself out by waking up, or I could just act like, like, okay, I'm going to let this play, but now that I'm about to, like, actually get hurt, now I'm going to influence. I'm going to move this way, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. And I feel like from doing that, that's kind of how I now think of life too. Like, okay, we can coast in this way sometimes, not as much as I do in my dreams, because life is a whole different ball game. But sometimes you can coast in this way, just to kind of like see what happens, and it's a little bit fun to see what life is going to do, and just kind of like try not to think so much about like what's going to happen. Granted, that is still difficult a lot of times because I run so many simulations, so it's really as if I've said it before in a video, that life is kind of like a play for me where I know everybody's script, but they don't even know that there's a script. They're just kind of coasting and seeing this as like real life. It's like as if it's like a Truman Show kind of thing, and it's my job a lot of times so that things can play out how it should naturally. It's my job to also play as if I do not know that there's a script, because if I let it known, which I know that I'm saying this now, but like for the people that it really matters with, like this is not really going to be a thing. So, but it's important to like not say things like, no, I know what's going to happen in chapter four, because then what's going to happen in chapter four that's imperative for what's going to happen in chapter seven might not happen. And it's kind of like a whole time ordeal that I don't like. I see so much of how me giving certain information and me doing certain actions might influence things that I don't want to touch it at certain times. I need to just, even though I know what's going to happen, I just want to watch it pan out, and play my role. But then there are certain times where I do need to like do things. Lastly, I think that when it comes to like the manifesting though, and I think this is something that we idealists just all have in general, it's like the world that we have, like for me especially as an extrovert, I think, because I believe that introverts, they the real world for them is their internal world. For me as an extrovert, the real world for me is the external world. That's the world that I most focus on. And so whatever that I'm building in my internal world, I'm trying to get it to match and align with my external world. So that means whatever it is that I'm idealizing in my head, ideating all of that, I'm trying to create it in the external world. If I want peace, I'm going to try to create it around me wherever I'm going. If I want chaos, that's what I'm going to try to do. If I want to have, understanding, or like if I want to have money, influence, whatever it might be, like I'm going to create that in my external world naturally, because that's what's real to me. I can't sit in my internal for too long and just be like, yeah, this is fine, I'm just going to escape, which is what I believe that a lot of introverts are capable of doing, and that's awesome. But it's like for me, it's like I have to see it in my external world, and the more that I'm able to create it in my internal world and the more potent that it becomes, then the more I can trust that when I plant that seed, the common seed analogy that I always use, when I plant that seed in the external world, it's going to be watered and it's going to produce pretty rapidly. So I feel like that sums up my thoughts on it, but it's a lot as you can see. So I just wanted to throw it out all on the table.
It makes a lot of sense. When you're talking about grabbing life by the neck, I'm imagining your type 9 self trying to like gently grab life by the neck.
It definitely happens. It definitely happens. Like, and that's the thing too, especially as a nine. It's like and I know I feel like a lot of people say this in general, but like when it comes to like being angry for other people, oh, that happens very rapidly. Like, let something happen to Jamila. Let something happen to you, and you will see me wring someone's neck. Like those jujitsu lessons I've been taking is gonna come out. Like, so it's not something that, like, oh yeah, he's a nice dude, whatever. Like it'll come out. Like when it's time to go, it's time to go. But when it comes to me, like something that coming against me, then that's where it's like a lot slower. to retaliate because I feel like, okay, I can take this longer. I can endure this. Like, do I really have to assert energy here? Do I really have to do this? Because it has to do with me. So, but yeah, like when it comes to manifesting in that way, like if I really feel like, nah, this is what needs to happen, I will grab life by the neck and I will make it happen.
That's nice to know. Yeah. I think one of the reasons why I'm very heavy on manifesting is because necessity is the best teacher. And when you have to, you have to. Literally, there's no, when your survival instincts come into play, you become very vigilant and you want to kind of move forward and do things for yourself because you have no other choice, it almost feels like. When you're only offered this or this, you gotta choose. It's like when you're in a Saw movie and they're like, you gotta get out of this maze in 5 minutes or you die. You don't really have a choice on whether or not you go through that maze. You do, but you know the outcomes of both sides very well. And yeah, that's a big motivator.
Yeah, no, I definitely feel you with that. And I think that I think that like that's where having the ability to do both comes in handy. So actually, yeah, I want to ask you then, how easy is it for you to just coast? Like just like I'm thinking of Crush from Finding Nemo, where he was just like just chilling and like he's like just on the East Australian current. He's like, yeah, I'm on the EAC, and he was just literally going with the flow. Like, how easy is that for you to do?
Now you have to take into consideration I'm also Asian, so this really plays a
Oh
factor in
yeah,
it. Do you
yes,
know the movie Shang-Chi that came out, a recent Marvel
yes.
movie?
Oh, it was great.
It's yeah,
In
it's
my opinion.
amazing. It is also very inaccurate to the Asian experience. There's a scene
Oh,
where I believe I saw a meme, so I haven't watched the movie yet, but I'm
okay.
planning to. And it's where I think his mom is saying, "I'm so proud of you," and he's like holding her son, and I'm like, that never happens in Asian families. And I was messaging my Asian friends, and they're like, "Yeah, I cringed so hard watching that movie because I love it, but it also has a really inaccurate portrayal of how it's like to be an Asian kid."
Interesting.
You never get that. Your parents will be on their deathbed, and they will not say, "I'm proud of you,"
Oh my goodness.
or "I love you." Oh man, that is like foreign language. That is no words of affirmation. You have words of criticism and words of comparison. You don't have like nice things said to you
Oh gosh.
because it's supposed to be motivating you to work harder. You
Right,
know,
right, right.
they use the stick instead of the carrot,
That's
and
crazy.
so there are a lot of my FE doesn't feel good in the culture that I'm in. You know, I love my culture, right? But I also
Mhm.
see the problems with it. And so that's why I don't accept reality because from a very early stage on, I noticed how little my household had of FE and it
Mhm.
was not cool.
Mm.
So from a young age, I wanted to have more of an FE atmosphere because you need that to grow into a healthy adult.
For sure.
Otherwise, you try to gain love in other areas of your life because you never had it in your family. And so I
Yeah.
understand that. And so I secretly craved to create a space where it was safe and that it would have the things that I needed to feel
Mhm.
psychologically safe and soft. A big
Mhm.
philosophy of mine is cultivating spaces where you can feel soft. And what that means is where you can feel comfortable being vulnerable and you can really say everything that's on your heart and soul and mind. And you don't have to hold anything back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can kind of take off the facade of your everyday life and be with the people who are accepting of who you are so you don't have to hold a script. So you were talking about how you see life as a play, and I do believe everyone has a script, as in everyone has their own programming. But I find a part of that script also comes from conditioning, and they get
Oh
it
yeah.
from feeling like they need to be someone for something. So
Mhm.
it's not their real personality, it's just something they've learned to become.
Mhm.
And I wanted to be that safe space where people didn't have to hold their scripts about who they needed to be, because that's harmful. That's like poisoning people slowly, because you'll notice when people become 50 or 60, they'll have a crisis where they're talking about how they were never allowed to be who they were, and then now they're going to die, and they try to reorient their life in a last minute ditch. It's
Mm,
almost like when people try to hand in essays within the 10-minute mark of needing to hand in your work, otherwise
mhm,
you're late. It's kind of like
mhm,
people who try to fix their lives at the very last ditch effort. And I really didn't want to cause that for anyone, and I didn't want to be that myself, because I wanted to make sure I got it right on the first run through of life, rather than realizing that I wasn't focusing my life around what mattered at the end, and then I realized I died and I didn't live up my purpose, or I stopped someone from living out their purpose because I didn't give them a space where they could flourish, and nowhere in life gave them a space to flourish. And so I because NI can sometimes see the dominoes in which something is set, you can kind of see, oh, if the dominoes were slightly different, this person who ended up like a hobo, or they didn't follow their dreams, or they didn't do the things that made them happy, maybe they're in addiction or something, in recovery, you realize that it was preventable. It's like, oh, if someone came into their life at this point in their life, and when they really needed it, things would be different. And it creates this compassion in me where I'm struck with that compassion. Just one little domino shift, and someone could be living out their potential, or they could be living in their just day-to-day normal life. Or there's so much impact and ripples that are around us, and I just wanted to leave positive ones. And so having a lot of negative ripples in my life, like events that caused me to become a lesser version of myself, I would not wish that on anyone. And so I want to be putting bricks and building a better world, rather than putting bricks and building a worse world. Because everything you do slightly adds to everything. It may not make a big difference, but it is contributing to something bigger always, whether you know it or not. And I just wanted my impact to be one that was net positive. I know that not everything can be positive, but I wanted the overallness to be positive instead of negative. So it's this desire to want to not compromise people's ability to feel happiness or joy. And then from having compassion for other people, I didn't want to compromise my own happiness or joy either, because I realized how pivotal it is for other people, that and I am other people. So I must also guard that. And, people say that cringy phrase, protect my energy, but I think it's true. You sometimes do have to protect your energy, because if you don't, when you're way older, you're going to have to realize there are a million things you have to unlearn, because you spread out your energy, and now you have to kind of undo the things that you put too much energy into. And so I have this big mentality about engineering a situation so that you don't have to create suffering that was preventable. But that's because I've went through a lot. And so when you are a kid who's gone through a lot, you naturally have a more, I don't know what you call it, strategic mindset, a mindset that is more,
intentional.
yeah,
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 that makes sense. That makes sense. You're not just gonna accept what you've been in because that's just how it's been all the time. If you've already been in a life where it's like there's not too much that you'd want to change, then it's easier to coast
yeah.
because there's not you don't have to be in this state of self-preservation for so much. You're just able
Mhm.
to relax, and you're able to you're able to you feel free, you feel you're in a soft energy space. And so it makes sense if you were in a soft energy space environment, then there'd be way less of a need to be able to always have to look at what's about to happen and anticipate it potentially, as well as trying to project onto and manifest in some way, which in a way uh, especially nowadays, like Twitter and everything, we see things like that's a trauma response, and it's like Maybe it could be. Again, I'm still trying to pattern all of this out, because especially as an NI user, like we're always going to be running simulations. We're always going to have this thought of anticipation. But at the end of the day, yeah, like if you have always like been in an environment where it's been kind of like hostile and dangerous towards you, then it's gonna be pretty like you're gonna want to change things because you're not gonna want to like suffer that way. Whereas like if there's somebody who's like more who's been gifted with more privilege, with more opportunity, with more safety, security, whatever it might be, then there's not too much they have to manifest and project because they're able to coast safely and securely. So that makes a lot of sense. And I also love what you said too about other people as well, like creating that space for other people. That's a big thing. I feel like that's one of the biggest reasons why I got into type. A lot of people see type as like, oh, and there's a lot of people who like are like, yeah, I'm kind of like over type now and all of that. And it's like, I get it. Like from their perspective, like, I think that it's not for everyone, but like, because those people, they tend to then see it more as limiting. But then there's a whole slew of people that see it as freeing instead because they see that, sure, you're boxed, but this is a huge box. Like I was talking to somebody the other day who said that when they found out that they were a thinker, then that freed so much for them. They were able to accept who they are. It's like, wow, I can take off this mask of like trying so hard to like be so nice and overly, accommodating in this way just so that people don't misunderstand me. And of course, this person knew like that doesn't mean that I don't that I now I can be a jerk and now I can just, whatever. But they can know that when they are being like more logical in response and like more, forthcoming, it's just coming from like their natural state of mind. It's not coming from a bad place. Like that's just how they think in general, and that's it's not something that's a deficiency for them. And it freed this person from being able to live behind that persona. And there are people who learn about type and then they try to fit into the type rather than try to allow the type to describe them. So it's like, oh, I found out that I'm an ESFP. So now I have to make sure that I'm doing the bungee jumping or I'm like, singing and like just all of this other stuff that you think that needs to define you as an ESFP. And the thing is, like, if you want to do all of that just for the fun of it and everything, cool. But if you feel like you have to in order to somehow like prove to yourself and to other people that you are an ESFP, then that's not cool. Same with like, I think we've talked about it before, like even NJs sometimes it's like, oh, now that I know that I'm an NI user, I need to get into tarot and I need to get into like this. And it's like, you don't have to. Like, if you want to, because you're genuinely interested in all of that, that's a whole different story because that's still you being you. But if you're doing it because because you believe that this is a way to be that type, then it's like, oh no, that's when now you've put on a mask of some sort. You've put on the mask of ENTJ rather than just being an ENTJ. And just letting the type, just letting you define the type in a way. So yeah, based off of everything that you said here, like that makes a lot of sense. And I think that, depending on the person, it'll all really just depend. So I really respect and admire that for you. And I think I wanted to ask too, like how would you know? How would you know if someone is 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 moving without a mask? How do you determine that? Like, we were talking about like people having scripts of some sort, which to me, it's like I share that aspect with you. I share that desire with you of wanting people to be their complete selves around me. And that's why, for me, what I do is wherever I'm walking on this stage we call life, I try to make sure that I'm still being myself. I try to make sure that I'm being a way that anything that will have people think that, okay, I have to be on this behavior so that person doesn't judge me or whatever, I try to move in a fashion that allows them to relax. And over time, it breaks down those walls. That way, um, I didn't really have to do or say anything. I didn't have to reveal that this is a stage that we're on. I just be myself, and then they naturally like melt away the walls and the boundaries, and not even not the boundaries, but like the walls and the defenses that they might have, the masks that they might be having on, um, and then they can just be their raw selves. How do you know when you have achieved in helping somebody to become that, when you've provided that space for them?
Yeah, I believe that there's a Carl Jung quote that says, "When two chemicals are together, both are transformed," or something similar to that. It's talking about how when you have two elements together, they transform each other. And so, with that general concept taken away from that, I think that you know when someone is taking down the mask because you're in a state of mutual transcendence with each other. When you interact with each other, it changes you both for the better. It unlocks sides of you that you didn't feel permission to share, even with yourself sometimes, if you didn't have that space to begin with. Because when you're able to be open and honest with other people, you're actually way more likely to be honest with yourself too. And if other people require you to put on a mask around them, there are sides of you you haven't fully explored. You know it's there, but you haven't went through the whole map or territory yet because you kind of have to do that in a dance with in conversationally with other people, or at least it's more effective that way. I find that I find more facets of myself through talking about it with others rather than completely by myself, although both are possible. And so if I find that when I start to discover more sides of me and I actually feel a sense of intimacy or closeness enhancing, that's a sign that they're taking down their mask. Another sign, too, is that I don't feel like I have to censor myself or add a bunch of disclaimers after what I said. So I
That's
know,
a big one for
yeah,
me as well.
yeah, yeah, I know
The
I'm putting
less disclaimers that I have, the more comfortable I feel with you, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I know I'm putting on a front when I add a lot of disclaimers because I'm afraid of offending people. Like when I was making the comment about Shang-Chi and how Asian households have that sort of mentality, I'm like, someone in the comments is definitely thinking, oh, I live in an Asian family and I don't have that circumstance. And I'm like, that's not the point. The point is, I'm sharing about how my group of Asian people, so it may not be all Asian people, but it's some of them. They experience it like this. I just am not using the correct words to say the correct message exactly. So it's almost like I know when I'm being transparent when I'm saying something and I'm not completely fully communicating it well, but I still trust the other person and not misconstrue what I originally meant to say, even if I didn't say it in a way that conveyed the right message. If I'm worried after that I might have upset someone, it means that I'm focusing more on the other person than I am on actually being transparent with my true thoughts. So that's another sign I have when I'm holding things back because I can see how it could go bad. And so that's one of my defenses. One of the other ways I can see that bringing down the walls happening is when someone considers you in their front row. So if you see your friends as a theater and, there's that front row, typically people will consider you in their front row when they're able to be their complete, unadulterated, true self around you. And if they don't consider you in their front row, it's probably because they have to hold back parts of themselves because they think that you can't take parts of them. And so when I have people describe the analogy, hey, where do I sit in your theater? And they say front row, then that means that they're comfortable with taking down their mask around me.
Wow, that was very beautiful. I love how much you're always able to think about such interpersonal matters, and even taking your own experiences and trying to not only help yourself from them, but then also creating a better life for those around you. It says a lot about the type of person that you are, and you being able to communicate the way that you're going about this and these signs, these telltales that allow this to kind of like allow us to identify when people are wearing these masks and when they're not. I think that that's just it's a really good thing for people who maybe even less seasoned INFJs or anybody, regardless of whatever type that you are, um, that are watching. They'll be able to like be more mindful of this. Maybe even just gave somebody else permission to like take down their own mask, to go back and to reevaluate who they are paying attention to, or who actually allows them to feel the most free in their own life, to allow them to reconsider who they're making uncomfortable in their own life. Like, hey, who actually does have to make so many disclaimers with me that I should probably be more careful with that now because yada yada yada, stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like that's a really good thing that, to be able to keep in mind, and to remind people of. I really respect that about you, and I guess just to like bring it back full circle before we close out, it then makes sense. Like once again, that when well, I guess this is then my final question. So, do you think that the notion that people who might try to project onto life and manifest onto life more frequently are probably operating from a place of like trauma of some sort, whereas those who are able to just coast more freely and stuff of that nature, of course not all the time, but is it because they just feel so much more safe, or maybe it has nothing to do with that at all?
I think partly, yeah. I think some people are also ambitious as well, and that drive will be seen in whether or not they want to enact their will onto life. It can come from many places. Um, it can come from role models too. Maybe you had a role model who changed the world, and then it makes you want to change the world too. It can also come from the place of wanting to serve. So the main thing that makes people happy is whether they're either growing or serving. And something Tony Robbins says is if you're depressed, you're probably obsessing over yourself. And a way to get over your depression is to either serve others or just focus more on things that aren't you. And so sometimes people want to manifest onto life because they see it as a pathway to purpose and happiness, which it is. And sometimes it does come out of trauma. You see no other way. And when I look at my own internal image of myself, what I see is I see like a lot of blood. And it's kind of like I picture like myself with a bunch of arrowheads into myself. And I kind of tell myself like I persist even though it hurts. And I know that life is full of suffering, but I don't want to be the one contributing to my suffering. So it's almost like a desperation to get out of a victim mentality. Like I don't want to feel like a victim or act like a victim. And I want to be gritty. I want to persevere. I want to be determined in spite of everything in my life while still acknowledging that the pain is there. Yeah. So it comes from a lot of places, is the answer.
Yeah, yeah, makes total sense. And yeah, my answer even to that was kind of similar because it's like I feel like there's just a lot of people who might even be in the same situation that you're in, and they accept life like, oh, just gotta trust the process. Which I think personally, I think that there are times when we should trust the process, and that's when we coast because it's like, okay, your intuition could be telling you there's going to be better days soon coming, and you just have to endure this. And then there's times where it's like, no, don't trust the process. Once again, you have to grip life by the throat. You got to make a difference. You got to make a change. You have to take control here and get what you want. And I guess there's wisdom in knowing when to do what. There's wisdom in knowing when to um, be a coaster and just trust the process and flow with whatever is happening, whether it's all good stuff or whether it's terrible things that's happening around you. And then there's wisdom in knowing when to actually take action and try to project and manifest whatever it is that you are really struggling with in your life, versus dang, you're like enforcing maybe a little bit like too much, and you're not allowing any room for actual life to happen because you're just doing so much of what you want, which I don't know, maybe that's not a bad thing at all either. um yeah.
One of the things that also makes me persevere on is that your thoughts actually enhance your thoughts. So, what I mean by that is, I have a lot of anchoring phrases that I've used ever since I was a kid, and I think that's responsible for me also wanting to manifest onto the world. So, as a kid, I would always imagine who I would like to be. And for some reason, no matter how painful things got, your imagination feels like reality to your brain, which is why it's really harmful sometimes if you imagine negative things in your brain, because your brain believes it. It thinks it's reality. If you call yourself disgusting in your brain actually thinks that the reality is around you is actually telling you you're disgusting, which is why it reinforces itself. And so the reason why I've always been so gritty is because I would always imagine this future self, and your imagination feels like reality, and that's how you kind of manifest it. You keep that image and you find something to anchor yourself. Some people anchor themselves in their relationships, so they have that one relationship that actually propelled them to win something. I have a friend who, he's naturally a coaster in life, but he had a girlfriend at the time who got him to participate in a hackathon. So this is where 50,000 people participate and they try to win this event. And he won because he adopted his girlfriend's faith in him at the time. And without her, he wouldn't have had the inner drive to have wanted to have done it for himself. And so some people reach working for the life that they want through another person. Some people are completely intrinsically motivated and they have a root reason for why. Maybe they have some sort of sob story that a protagonist in a movie or TV show has, and it propels them forward. Sometimes it's the desire to be different than everything around them. So for me, what resulted in me wanting to work hard for myself was because I saw everything around me, and I told myself I didn't want to be like them. So you can either role model things or you can anti-role model things. It's like, I just want to be as far away from you as possible, and that is very motivating to me. And so having quotes like, I want to create a life where I don't feel the need to escape from. If you're in your, for me, in my life, I've always wanted to escape from the life that I was in. So my desire was to have this place where I didn't feel the urge to escape from it, that it was good enough, that I was okay with it. I wanted to create a future self where I wasn't resenting past me for not doing the things that I wanted to do then.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think that's a good note to like end on. So yeah, thanks so much everyone for watching. Please leave your questions, comments, concerns. Share the video if y'all enjoyed this talk. Let us know what you think, and how much do you impose and manifest into life. What was your life like? What kind of situations have you been in? And are you more of a coaster? Are you more of a projector? Like, do you feel like you know when to switch between both? Are you able to switch between both? Yeah, let us know what your thoughts are. And until next time, stay
Stay
sharp.
sharp.
また夜が明ければお別れ夢は時幻に